Hello, welcome to Chimney Sweep University Training Series. Today's 1-hour lesson will focus on Chapter 7 of NFPA 211. If this is a free version, then interactive questions, quizzing, and answers will be turned off. If this is a paid version for continuing education unit or certification requirements, then you will be in a full interactive version. For information of where to sign up for the premium version, go to chimneysweeps.com and find the section regarding training. Good luck, and enjoy your presentation.
All right, ready to get into some serious chimney talk. We're going deep on masonry chimneys today.
Sounds good to me.
Specifically, Chapter 7 of the NFPA 211 standard.
Oh, the nitty-gritty.
The nitty-gritty, yeah. Sections 7.1 through 7.1.1, basically how to build these things, all the details, from the ground up.
Like why you need a good foundation and what corbelling even is. Ever heard of that?
Not before I started prepping for this, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, so Section 7.1.
General requirements.
Yeah. It seems obvious, but they really emphasize a strong foundation.
Oh, it's absolutely crucial.
Why is that so important for a chimney? What could happen?
Well, think about it. It's a giant weight sitting on your house. And it's got to deal with frost heave, too, especially in places that get cold.
Ah, so if the ground freezes and thaws.
Exactly. If that foundation shifts or cracks, the whole chimney could be compromised.
It's like a house of cards then.
Pretty much. So yeah, stable foundation prevents those cracks and keeps everything nice and straight.
Okay, that makes sense. Then Section 7.1.1 mentions this 4-inch airspace around the chimney. Is that just to keep things cool?
It's all about heat transfer, really. That airspace is a buffer between the hot chimney and anything that could burn, like wood framing.
I see, so the wood doesn't get too hot.
Exactly. You're reducing the risk of things igniting.
A fire hazard, yeah.
Yeah.
Smart. Now this is where it gets interesting. Section 7.1.2. Corbeeling. Yes, I'll look that one up.
A lot of people do. It's a pretty neat construction technique. Basically how masons go from a smaller to a larger chimney size, like when you need a wider opening for the fireplace.
I was picturing it like stepping out each layer of bricks.
You got it. Kind of like a pyramid.
But that seems like it'd be tricky to get right.
Oh, it is. And that's why the standard's so specific about how far those bricks can project. It's all about a gradual transition, keeping things structurally sound. You don't want that weight suddenly jutting out too far.
Right, that makes sense. And then the standard mentions the flue liner has to be supported by this core-beamed masonry too.
Yeah, the liner is that inner layer, right? The one that protects the bricks from all the intense heat and the nasty stuff from burning.
So it has to be supported as the chimney gets wider.
Otherwise, you could get cracks, and then those dangerous gases can escape.
So corbelling isn't just about looks?
Definitely not. It's structural, big time.
Okay. Section 7.1.3 seems pretty simple. The chimney flue can't change shape near anything flammable.
Right?
Why is that so important? Is it about those hot spots again?
Yep. Any sudden changes in shape can make those hot spots in the flue, and if they're too close to something that can burn...
You're basically asking for trouble.
Pretty much. It's about keeping the temperatures consistent, maintaining safe clearances.
Smooth and gradual transitions are key.
Exactly.
Got it. On to Section 7.1.4 now. Clean out openings.
Oh, those are essential for maintenance.
Yeah, like little access panels, I guess.
Exactly. So the chimney sweeps can get in there and remove the soot and creosote.
That's the stuff that builds up, right?
Yeah, and it's highly combustible. You don't want that stuff hanging around.
So this is about preventing chimney fires.
Absolutely. Those fires can be incredibly dangerous, spreading to the whole house.
Wow, okay. And that's why they need those tight-fitting doors on the openings, too, I bet.
Yep. You don't want soot and creosote leaking out into your house.
Makes sense.
Ah.
Okay, what about Section 7.1.5 then? This one's about the space below the flue base, an area you might not think about too much.
You'd be surprised. It's super important. They say you got to fill that space with a non-combustible material and then seal it with a wash.
A wash? Like cleaning it?
No. It's that sloping surface, usually made of concrete or mortar. You often see it at the top of a chimney.
Oh, right below the flue.
Yeah, it's like a little angled part that directs water away.
Like a mini roof.
Exactly. But why it matters down at the base is because, well, imagine water getting into that space below the flue.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it can cause damage over time, especially in places where it freezes and thaws, that trapped water expands and cracks things.
So the wash is protecting the chimney from the elements, essentially.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Wow. I'm starting to see how much detail goes into this.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Section 7.1.6? Fire stopping. That sounds serious.
Oh, it is. It's all about preventing fire from spreading through the building.
Makes sense, since the chimney goes right through everything.
Exactly. You have to seal any gaps between the chimney and the floors and ceilings it passes through.
Using something that won't burn, obviously.
Right, things like mineral wool or fire-resistant caulking. Some materials even expand when they get hot, sealing those gaps up tight.
So it's like creating fireproof compartments in the house.
You got it. And this is especially important in those hidden spaces, like attics and crawl spaces.
Where a fire could spread without anyone noticing.
Exactly. Fire stopping gives people more time to get out safely.
That's a good thing. So it's not just about the chimney itself, but how it fits into the whole house.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Okay, on to section 7.1.7 then. This one's about how thick the chimney walls have to be.
Yeah, it's not just about height. It's about sturdy construction, too.
Makes sense. They need to be strong.
The standard says how thick they need to be based on the height of the chimney and what materials they're using. And it also talks about the withes.
Withes?
It's those vertical sections that separate the flues if you have a chimney with multiple flues.
Oh, right, for like a fireplace, a furnace.
Exactly. So each flue needs its own separate compartment, basically.
Why is that so important? What if they shared?
Well, imagine you've got a wood-burning fireplace and a high-efficiency gas furnace, both using the same chimney.
I wouldn't think they'd play well together.
You're right. The gases from each appliance are different temperatures, different compositions.
So you don't want them mixing.
Exactly. By separating them with properly built withes, each appliance can vent safely and efficiently. It's like separate lanes on a highway.
I like that analogy. All right, section 7.1.8 then. Tall chimneys. What's special about them?
Wind and earthquakes.
Ah, so those forces can really affect them.
Oh yeah, especially tall, slender chimneys. Imagine them swaying in the wind. It puts a lot of stress on the structure.
So you have to brace them extra carefully?
Exactly. This part of the standard talks about bracing, reinforcement, even extra support for the foundation, making sure those tall chimneys can withstand those forces without collapsing or cracking.
So it's like building a skyscraper almost.
You got it. It's not just about standing up straight. It's about standing strong against the elements.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to section 7.1.9. This one seems to be about using old D chimneys for new appliances.
Yeah, and it's definitely a proceed with caution section. Just because you have an old chimney doesn't mean it's going to work for any appliance you hook up to it.
So you can't just assume it's good to go.
Nope. You got to carefully think about the size, the materials, the condition of that old chimney. Make sure it actually matches the new appliance. For example, imagine trying to vent a modern high-efficiency gas furnace into a chimney that was built for an old coal furnace.
I'm guessing that's not a good idea.
Not at all. The gases from a modern appliance might be way hotter or more corrosive than what the old chimney was designed for. You could seriously damage the liner, or worse, have those gases get blown back into your house.
Yikes, that sounds dangerous. So what should you do if you want to reuse an old chimney?
Get a professional to look at it. Seriously, they can tell you if it's even possible or if you need a whole new chimney.
Better safe than sorry, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Safety first.
All right, on to fireplaces specifically then. Section 7.1.0 talks about hearth extensions. Remind me, what are those exactly?
It's that non-combustible area in front of the fireplace opening. That safety zone to keep embers and sparks from setting the floor on fire.
Right. So it's like an extension of the fireplace, but made of something that won't burn?
Exactly. And the standard's very specific about how big it needs to be, both in depth and width.
So it's not just any random size?
Nope. It's all about having enough space to prevent those accidental fires. And the material matters too. It's got to be something non-combustible, like brick, stone, concrete, or tile.
Makes sense. No wood hearth extensions. Now, Section 7.1.1 goes into openings in chimney walls. Is that common?
It can be. You've got those clean outdoors we talked about, plus sometimes access panels for inspection, and even some decorative features involve openings.
So it's not just about cleaning then?
Nope. But no matter why you have an opening, the standard makes it clear that you got to construct and support it properly.
So you're not weakening the whole chimney?
Exactly. It's a balance between function and safety.
And I'm guessing fire stopping is important here too, right? Just like around the whole chimney.
You got it. Any hole in that fire-resistant barrier has got to be sealed up tight.
Like a boat. You can't have any leaks.
Exactly. All right, are you ready for the grand finale? Section 7.1.112, chimney caps?
Oh yeah. These seem like a small detail, but I bet they're more important than people think.
You bet. They do a lot more than just look nice.
Like what?
Well, first off, they're like a little hat for your chimney, keeping out the rain, snow, all that debris.
Okay, so it keeps the chimney dry.
Yeah, which is important because moisture can cause damage. It can mess with the liner and even block the draft.
So a chimney cap keeps everything flowing smoothly.
You got it. But that's not all. It also helps stop downdrafts.
That's when the wind blows the smoke back down, right?
Exactly. A good chimney cap will deflect those downdrafts, making sure the smoke and gases go up and out like they're supposed to.
I bet that's especially helpful in windy areas.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's one more thing. Animals.
Ah, yes. Everyone's heard stories about squirrels in chimneys.
It's not just squirrels, it's birds, raccoons, all sorts of critters. They love to build nests in chimneys, which can cause blockages, fire hazards, and even make your house smell bad.
Plus, you don't really want them living in your chimney.
Exactly. So a good chimney cap will have a screen or mesh to keep those animals out while still letting the smoke and gases escape.
So chimney caps are a must-have, basically.
Pretty much, and the standard tells you exactly how they should be designed and built to work properly.
Like, what are some of the specifics?
Well, it says how high the cap needs to be to make sure it can actually deflect those downdrafts. And it talks about the screening, making sure it's strong enough to keep animals out, but still allows for good airflow. Plus, the cap itself has to be made from tough, weather-resistant materials that can handle the elements.
So it's not just slapping any old piece of metal on top.
Not at all. It's worth getting a good quality chimney cap that meets all the standards.
It seems like such a small detail, but it makes a big difference.
Exactly. It's all about protecting your chimney and your home.
All right, so that was a whirlwind tour through section 7.1.
The foundation of masonry chimney knowledge.
Ha ha ha, yes. And I have to say, I'm really impressed by how much thought and detail goes into every part of this.
It all comes down to safety and making sure those chimneys work properly for years to come.
It's clearly more than just stacking some bricks.
Definitely not a DIY project for beginners.
Absolutely. You need a professional who knows all these standards to get it right.
100%.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground here in section 7.1.
The foundation, literally.
Literally, yes. But there's more to come in chapter 7. Stay tuned for the next part of our deep dive where we'll explore the fascinating world of chimney liners.
Can't wait. All right, so ready to go deeper. Inside the chimney this time.
Yeah, let's do it. We've talked about the outside, the bricks and mortar and all that, but
What's happening on the inside?
exactly, what about the part that actually channels the smoke and the hot gases?
That's where chimney liners come in.
Ah,
And
indeed.
this is section 7.2 of the standard, all about liners, why they matter, the different kinds.
So it's not just a hollow brick tube then?
Definitely not. Remember, we're talking crazy high temperatures in there.
I'm
Plus all those corrosive byproducts from burning stuff.
Yeah, okay.
So the liner protects the masonry from all that. It's a barrier.
A barrier between the nasty stuff and the bricks.
Exactly. Keeps those hot gases and corrosive things from eating away at the bricks and mortar. If that happens, you get cracks, deterioration, a chimney that's not safe or are efficient.
Like a suit of armor for the inside of the chimney?
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
So what are these liners usually made of? Is there like a standard material?
Well, the standard actually lists a whole bunch of different materials.
Okay.
Each one has pros and cons, of course. And most importantly, some are better for certain appliances.
I see. So matching the liner to what you're burning, is that the key?
Exactly. Like, clay tile liners are pretty common for wood-burning fireplaces because they can take the heat and they're good with that corrosive wood smoke.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about those shiny metal chimneys you see on newer houses? What kind of liners do those use?
Those usually have metal liners too, but the type of metal depends.
Oh, okay.
Stainless steel is a popular one because it resists corrosion and can handle high temps.
So it's all about picking the right liner for the job.
Exactly. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier. Remember section 7.1.9?
The one about reusing old chimneys?
Yeah, that one. You can't just assume an old chimney with a liner will be okay for any appliance.
Because the liner might not be compatible.
Exactly. Like if you try to vent a new high-efficiency furnace into a chimney with a liner that was meant for, say, an old coal furnace.
I'm guessing that wouldn't end well.
Probably not. The gases from the new furnace might be way too hot or too corrosive for that old liner. It could get eaten away, literally.
Oh, wow.
Or you could get blockages if the new appliance creates more soot and stuff than the old chimney was designed for. And the worst case scenario is backdrafting.
Backdrafting, what's that?
That's when those hot, toxic gases get pushed back down the chimney into the living space.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, not good. It can happen if the liner's damaged or blocked, or if the chimney's just not the right size for the new appliance.
So this is serious stuff, not just about efficiency.
You got it. And to try and prevent these mismatches, the standard has a whole section on labeling.
Oh, okay.
Chimneys and liners are supposed to have labels telling you what kind of appliance they're meant for.
So it's like a warning label almost.
Pretty much, use only with, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Helps people make the right choices and avoid those dangerous situations.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked foundation, construction, liners.
Mm-hmm.
What LSE goes into making a safe, efficient masonry chimney?
Well, even with the perfect chimney and liner, you still got to worry about clearances.
Ah, right. Keeping it far enough away from anything that could burn.
Exactly. And Section 7.3 gets into all the specifics for both interior and exterior chimneys.
So it's not just about that 4-inch airspace we talked about before.
Nope, there's a whole set of rules. It depends on how the chimney's built, what materials they used, whether it's exposed to the outside or inside the building, all sorts of things.
So there are charts and tables and all that.
Oh yeah, tons of them. And you got to get those clearances right from the start during the design phase.
Otherwise, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Pretty much. So if you're building a new house or adding a chimney, you got to pay close attention to this section.
It's all about preventing fires.
Exactly. And it's not just the chimney itself, it's fireplaces, hearths, making sure those heat sources are far enough away from anything that could burn.
Okay, what if you have a really tight space and you just can't meet those minimum clearances? What then?
There are ways to reduce the clearances sometimes, but it usually means adding extra protection.
Like what kind of protection?
Think non-combustible insulation or those special heat shields. They can help manage the heat and let you get away with slightly smaller clearances.
So it's possible, but it's more complicated.
You got it. You definitely want an expert involved, someone who knows the code and can make sure it's all done safely.
Safety first, as always.
Absolutely. And, going through all this really makes you appreciate how much goes into designing and building a chimney properly.
It's way more than just piling up some bricks.
You said it. And as we keep going in Chapter 7, we'll see even more examples of how these standards all work together to make these things safe and functional.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What else is in store for us in this chapter? So we've covered a lot of ground: foundations, construction, liners, clearances. It's amazing how much goes into making sure a masonry chimney is safe and efficient.
And we're not quite done yet?
Really? There's more.
Oh yeah, Chapter 7 has a few more sections for us, and they're important ones.
Okay, bring it on. What's next in our chimney journey?
Well, let's circle back to those fireplace hearth extensions we mentioned earlier, Section 7.1.10.
Ah, right, the non-combustible area in front of the fireplace.
Exactly, that safety zone. Keeps embers and sparks from setting the floor on fire. And the standard is really specific about how big those hearth extensions need to be.
So it's not just picking any old piece of tile and calling it a day?
Nope. It's got to be big enough, both in depth and width, and the size depends on the fireplace opening itself.
So a bigger opening means a bigger hearth extension? Makes sense.
Exactly. It's all about that safety buffer. And it can't just be any ammonitial either. It has to be something that won't burn, like brick, stone, concrete, or tile.
Right, no wood hearth extensions. That'd be kind of ironic.
Yeah, a little counterproductive. Now, Section 7.1.1, this one might surprise you. It's all about openings in chimney walls.
Openings, like besides the fireplace itself.
Yeah, like those clean-out openings we talked about. Those are openings, right?
Oh, right, for cleaning and inspection.
Exactly. But even when you need an opening, you can't just go cutting holes willy-nilly. The standard says you got to make sure those openings are properly supported.
So you're not weakening the whole structure.
Exactly. It's all about balancing function with strength.
And I'm sensing a theme here. Fire stopping, right? Around those openings, too.
You got it. Every single hole in that fire-resistant barrier needs to be sealed up tight with non-combustible material.
No leaks allowed.
Nope. Okay, ready for the last section?
Yeah.
7.1.1 twin blobs. Chimney caps.
Oh, yeah, those. They seem like a little thing, but I bet they're more important than people realize.
You bet. They're like a little guardian for your chimney.
Okay, tell me more. What do they actually do?
Well, think about all the stuff that falls from the sky. Rain, snow, leaves, branches, who knows what.
It's like a little umbrella for the chimney.
That's a good way to put it. A chimney cap keeps all that junk OUT. Otherwise, it can cause damage, make the liner deteriorate faster, even block the draft.
So it keeps the chimney dry and working properly.
Exactly. But that's not all. It also helps with downdrafts.
Ah, the dreaded downdraft. When the wind blows the smoke back down.
You got it. A good chimney cap will deflect those downdrafts, making sure the smoke goes UP and OUT like it's supposed to.
Makes sense. I bet those are especially helpful in windy areas.
Oh yeah, essential. And there's one more thing chimney caps are good for. Keeping out unwanted guests.
Oh, you mean animals?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Squirrels, birds, raccoons, they all love to build nests in chimneys.
And that's a problem because...
Blockages, fire hazards, and a smelly house.
Yikes. So the chimney cap keeps them OUT while letting the smoke escape.
Exactly. It's like a little bouncer for your chimney.
So what makes a good chimney cap then? Any tips?
The standard has a whole section on this. It talks about how high the cap needs to be so it can actually deflect those downdrafts. And the screening, it has to be strong enough to keep animals out but still let the air flow through. Plus, the cap itself has to be made of tough stuff that can handle the weather.
So it's more than just finding any old piece of metal.
Oh yeah, it's worth investing in a good quality chimney cap that meets all the requirements.
Makes sense. It's a small detail, but it can make a big difference in how well the chimney works.
Exactly. And that wraps up section 7.1.1, the final piece of our chimney construction puzzle. Yeah.
So what kind of things do we need to be thinking about when we talk about, how these chimneys are put together?
Well, first off, think about the weight of a masonry chimney.
Okay.
It's built with solid materials like brick or reinforced concrete, so it needs a super strong foundation to support all that weight.
Yeah.
We're talking about, concrete footings that extend deep into the ground,
Yeah.
even below the frost line in colder climates to prevent, the ground from freezing and expanding, which could crack the foundation.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like you're saying, like building a house, right?
Exactly.
You don't want it to sink or shift.
Exactly.
So solid foundation is key for both. So,
Yeah.
okay, what else is important, in terms of the construction?
Well, the thickness of the chimney walls
Okay.
is really crucial too.
Yeah.
You need those walls to be sturdy enough to handle the weight and the heat from the fireplace or whatever appliance it's connected to.
Right.
Generally, you're looking at a minimum thickness of 8 inches, especially if the chimney isn't lined.
Oh, okay. So the walls need to be strong enough to contain the heat, but chimneys aren't just straight up and down, right?
Right.
Sometimes they have those stepped out brick sections. Like, what's the reason for that?
You're talking about corbelling?
Corbelling. Okay.
That's a technique where the bricks are layered in a way that creates, those steps or ledges.
Right.
And it's used for a few reasons.
Oh, yeah.
One, to support beams that might be running through the chimney. To create a passage, for things like a stovepipe to go through the wall.
Yeah.
Or even to change the thickness of the chimney wall itself, depending on what's needed structurally.
So it's both functional and kind of decorative, right?
Yeah. Adds a little visual interest.
It's making me look at these structures a little differently already.
Right.
But I'm guessing the inside of a chimney is just as important as the outside.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's where the chimney lining comes in.
Okay.
It's like giving the inside of the chimney a protective shield against the intense heat and those corrosive byproducts that are created when you burn fuel.
So it's like a suit of armor for the chimney. But how do you choose the right lining?
Right.
Is there just one standard type that works for everything?
That's where things get really interesting. See, the type of lining you need actually depends on the appliance that's hooked up to the chimney.
Okay.
And that's because different appliances produce different levels of heat and different types of byproducts.
So it's not just about slapping any old liner in there. It has to be matched to the appliance. But how do you even know what kind of lining to use? Is there some sort of guidebook for that?
There is NFPA 211 actually categorizes appliances based on the type of fuel they burn and how hot their flue gases get.
Okay, appliance categories.
Yes.
So you're telling me, like, my cozy wood-burning fireplace and my efficient gas furnace,
Exactly.
they fall into different categories.
Exactly. They generate different levels of heat and different byproducts, so they need different types of liners. Think of it like choosing the right cooking pot for your stovetop.
Okay.
You wouldn't use a delicate glass pot on a high heat burner, right?
That's a great analogy. It
Yeah.
makes perfect sense that different appliances need different liners to handle the job safely.
Yeah.
So what kind of materials are we talking about here? What are some of the common types of chimney liners?
Well, one of the most common types you'll see is the fire clay liner.
Okay.
It's been a popular choice for quite a while, especially for those residential fireplaces and wood stoves we were talking about.
Ah, fire clay. Good old-fashioned brick, right?
Yep.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But you mentioned there are specific rules about these fire clay liners.
Right.
What's that about?
You're right. It might seem simple, but there are some key details that make a big difference, for safety and how well it works. For example, with fire clay liners, you need a very specific airspace between the liner itself and the chimney wall.
So we're not just, stuffing it in there and calling it a day.
Right, exactly.
How much space are we talking?
For residential and those low-heat chimneys, the airspace around a fire clay liner should be between a ½ inch and 4 inches.
Okay.
And here's the thing that trips people up a lot.
Okay.
That space is supposed to be left empty.
Wait, empty?
Empty.
You mean no insulation or anything?
Nothing.
Why would you
Yeah.
leave that space empty?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But that empty space is actually really important for safety.
Okay.
It allows for ventilation and for the liner to expand as it heats up. Think of it like giving the liner room to breathe.
So it's not wasted space.
Yeah.
It's actually serving a purpose.
Right.
So it can expand without cracking or, putting stress on the walls.
Exactly. If that space was filled, the liner could get too hot and become damaged.
Right.
And that could lead to dangerous gases escaping into your house.
Oh.
Or even a chimney fire. That air gap is there to keep things running smoothly and safely.
Wow. It's amazing how much thought goes into these seemingly small details.
Yeah.
It really highlights how important it is to follow those NFPA 211 guidelines. So we've talked about fire clay. What about other liner materials?
Sure.
How would you use those?
Well, you have metal liners, which are often used for gas appliances.
Okay.
They come in different types of metal, depending on the heat and corrosive byproducts.
Right.
And then there are ceramic liners, which are known for their durability and resistance to high temperatures.
So choosing the right liner is
Mhm.
kind of like a puzzle. You have to match it to the appliance
Yeah,
and consider, the specifics of the installation.
right.
What happens when you have a chimney that needs to handle multiple appliances? Can you just put a bunch of different liners in there?
That's a great question. It gets a little more complex when you have multiple flues within a single chimney. You
Right.
can't just cram them all in there.
Right.
Each liner needs proper support and spacing
Okay.
to make sure everything's working safely and efficiently.
It's like designing a highway for the flue gases,
Hmm.
making sure they have their own lanes and don't crash into each other.
Mhm.
So spacing is crucial. What else do you have to consider when you're dealing with these multiple liners?
Well, you have to think about the different materials and their properties.
What-
Some liners expand and contract more than others when they heat up,
Right?
so you need to make sure they have enough room to move without bumping into each other or putting stress on the structure.
It's like choreographing a dance for the liners.
Uh-huh.
Make sure they can all move freely without stepping on each other's toes. And I imagine you have to be extra careful when you're mixing different types in the same chimney.
Absolutely. If you're using a combination of fire clay, metal, or ceramic liners, you need to pay close attention to the manufacturer's instructions
Right.
and the requirements of NFPA 211.
Of course.
Make sure everything is compatible and installed correctly.
It sounds like a job for a professional, someone
Yeah.
who really knows what they're doing and can handle all those, intricacies.
You're right. It's not something you want to tackle without the proper knowledge and experience.
Right.
A qualified chimney professional can assess your needs, choose the right materials, and install everything according to code,
Right.
ensuring the safety and longevity of your chimney system.
So we've covered how chimneys are built, the importance of lining and the, complexities of these multiple flues. But what about those situations where you might have a liner that's not typically found in a masonry chimney,
Okay.
say a gas vent running through a brick chimney? Is there anything special that needs to be done in those cases?
That's a good point.
Right.
When you have a situation like that where you're using a liner type that's not traditionally associated with masonry, NFPA 211 requires clear labeling.
So we're talking about putting a sign on the chimney that says caution gas vent only or something?
Essentially, yes. It might seem like a small thing, but that label's really important for safety.
Okay.
Imagine someone unfamiliar with the chimney, maybe a new homeowner or a contractor doing repairs.
Right.
They might assume it's a standard masonry flue and try to connect a wood-burning appliance to it.
Right. That could be disastrous.
Exactly. You'd have a mismatch of fuel types and venting systems, which could lead to all sorts of problems.
Right.
So that label is there to prevent those mistakes from happening.
Okay. So it's all about clear communication and making sure everyone understands how it's supposed to be used.
Exactly. It's another example of how NFPA 211 really prioritizes safety by setting clear guidelines.
It's fascinating how much thought goes into these chimney systems. It's not just about stacking bricks and calling it a day.
Right.
There are so many factors to consider to make sure everything is working safely and efficiently.
Absolutely. And we've really only scratched the surface.
Right.
NFPA 211 covers so many different topics related to chimneys, fireplaces, and venting systems. There's always more to learn.
Yeah. I'm definitely feeling more informed and maybe a little bit in awe of how complex these structures really are.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away, let's just recap what we've learned about, NFPA 211 Section 7.2. We've talked about how masonry chimneys are constructed, the importance of the lining, the different categories of appliances,
Right.
the ins and outs of fire, clay, flue liners, and the complexities of the installation, especially when you have multiple flues.
And don't forget the importance of clear labeling when you're using those non-traditional liners in a masonry chimney.
Right. That's a key takeaway for sure. This deep dive has been incredibly insightful, and I have to admit I feel a lot more confident about my chimney knowledge now.
That's great. And remember, if you have any doubts or questions about your chimney system, it's always best to consult with a qualified professional.
Good advice.
They can help you navigate the intricacies of NFPA 211 and make sure your chimney is safe and up to code.
You know, it's amazing how much we take these things for granted, like chimneys.
I know, right?
I mean, I knew they were important, but I never really stopped to think about all the details that go into making sure they're safe and efficient.
Yeah, it's true. We often just see, the brick and mortar and don't think about the science and engineering behind it all.
Right, and all those guidelines and regulations in NFPA 211, they might seem like overkill at first, but
Right.
now I see why they're so important. It's all about, protecting people and property from
Yeah.
those potential hazards.
Absolutely. It's easy to overlook the dangers of, improper chimney construction or maintenance.
Right.
We're talking about the risk of fire, carbon monoxide poisoning, structural damage,
Right.
serious stuff.
Yeah, it's not just about keeping our homes warm and cozy.
Right.
It's about making sure those systems that provide that warmth are operating safely.
Exactly. And that's why NFPA 211 is such a valuable resource.
Yeah.
It really provides a comprehensive framework for
Yeah.
safe and efficient chimney and venting systems.
It's like a roadmap,
It is.
For anyone involved with these systems, homeowners, contractors, inspectors,
Absolutely.
they can all benefit from understanding these standards.
It's about empowering people with the knowledge to make informed decisions and create safe environments.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for these chimney systems.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about how these systems work, the better equipped you are to make safe and informed choices.
Well said. And we're zeroing in on section 7.3 and 7.4.
Okay.
Those are all about safety regs.
Right, the stuff you don't always think about.
Exactly. But it's super important.
Absolutely.
So get ready for some seriously specific construction requirements.
Oh, yeah.
It's like clearances, liners, even spark arrestors, the whole shebang.
The things that keep those chimneys running safe and sound.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's really fascinating to me?
What's that?
Just how detailed these regs can get.
No, for sure, but there's a reason for it.
Right. I mean, whether you're planning a renovation, making sure your current setup is safe, or even just curious about how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Knowing the ins and outs can really make a difference.
Totally agree.
So let's jump right in.
Okay, sounds good.
First up, clearances for those masonry chimneys. Going through the material, it really struck me how much emphasis there is on the space around a chimney.
Yeah, it can be surprising.
It's like, who knew there were so many rules about empty space, right?
Right. But it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
You've got this structure channeling all that intense heat.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is for that heat to transfer to anything that could catch fire.
Oh, for sure. Definitely don't want that.
And that's where Table 7.2 comes in.
Okay.
It lays out all those minimum airspace clearances you need between the chimney and anything combustible.
Right, like wood framing or insulation, right?
Exactly. And here's the thing. Section 7.3.1.2 is crystal clear on this. That airspace needs to be maintained. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
So no stuffing insulation in there to try and seal things up?
Nope, absolutely not. No filling it with anything.
Well, there goes my weekend project.
Huh. But hold on, there's a bit of a twist in section 7.3.1.4. For residential chimneys, you can actually use some non-combustible trim to keep debris out of that airspace.
Okay, so there's a little wiggle room there.
Right, but here's the catch. That doesn't fly for those high heat appliances.
So there's a difference there.
Big time. That distinction is super important because those high heat appliances, things like industrial furnaces, they generate way more heat.
Oh, yeah, for
So
sure.
the stakes are higher. It's not just about fire hazards at that point. It's
Right.
also about burns for anyone working near the chimney.
You definitely don't want anyone getting hurt.
Exactly. In some cases, you might even need some serious engineering solutions to make sure everything is up to code.
Wow, so it's not just as simple as slapping up a chimney.
Nope, not always.
It's really about thinking through all the potential risks.
Absolutely. And the code is designed to make you think about those risks.
That makes sense.
It's like it's saying, hey, we get it, you need to keep stuff out of that airspace, but safety first.
safety first.
Always.
Okay, so we've talked about keeping things clear around the outside of the chimney, But what about the inside? What about those chimney liners?
Right, good point. Section 7.2 dives into that, all the specific materials you can use inside a masonry chimney.
Okay, so we're getting into the nitty-gritty here.
Oh, yeah. It gets really granular, like Table 5.2.3.2 breaks down all the acceptable liner types for different appliances.
So whether it's for gas, special gas vents, or even pellet fuel burning appliances, there's a specific liner for each.
Exactly. There are different liners for gas appliances, type B and special gas vents, and then there's different ones for pellet fuel burning appliances.
Wow, it's amazing how specific these codes get.
It is. And there's a really important safety point highlighted in sections 7.2.6, 7.2.7, and 7.2.9.
What's that?
If you got a liner that's not right for all types of appliances, that chimney needs to be clearly labeled.
Oh, so you don't want someone accidentally hooking up the wrong appliance and creating a dangerous situation.
Exactly. It's like the code is anticipating those potential mistakes and putting in safeguards.
That's good. I like that kind of forward thinking.
Yeah, it's all about preventing accidents before they happen.
Now, one detail that really stood out to me was in section 7.2.21.1. It talks about fire clay flue lining in residential chimneys
Okay.
and how it needs very specific airspace between 1/2 inch and 4 inches, and it has to be left open.
Right. It's like the Goldilocks of air gaps, not too big, not too small.
Yeah, exactly. But why so specific?
It's all about thermal expansion. That fire clay needs room to breathe, to expand and contract as it heats up and cools down.
So if you restrict that movement or fill the space, the lining could crack.
Exactly. And that could compromise the entire chimney.
So even those seemingly tiny details have a major impact on safety.
Absolutely. Every detail matters when it comes to chimneys.
Well, speaking of major impact, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about commercial and industrial incinerators.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Now, these aren't your backyard burn barrels.
No, definitely not.
We're talking heavy-duty equipment. Yeah. With some serious chimney requirements.
For sure. And sections 4.1.3 and 4.1.3.1 highlight a key safety consideration there.
Okay, which is?
Chimney sizing for natural draft conditions.
So even in facilities with all the fancy tech, the ability for a chimney to work properly during a power outage is crucial.
Absolutely. It's all about having those backup systems in place, just in case.
It's fascinating how these basic principles like natural draft are still so important, even in the age of high-tech systems.
It really is. Safety redundancy is paramount in building codes.
And you know what else is fascinating?
What's that?
Section 4.1.3 goes even further and says that these chimneys need to be designed to allow for the complete consumption of combustible material, even if you can't just stop the burning by shutting off the fuel.
Right. You have to account for that worst-case scenario.
It's like the code is saying, let's think about the worst that could happen and make sure we can handle it safely.
Exactly. You always have to be prepared.
Okay, now on to a topic that I'll admit initially made me think, really, this is still relevant.
Let me guess.
Spark arrest doors.
Yeah. I know what you mean. They sound kind of old-fashioned.
Right, like something out of a history book.
But you know what? They're still a vital safety feature, especially for incinerators and those high-heat appliances.
So section 4.6.4 is all about preventing those stray sparks from causing fires, especially in areas with a lot of dry vegetation or other flammable materials.
Exactly. It's a simple device that can make a huge difference in preventing a potentially devastating fire.
So while it might seem old-fashioned, it's still a crucial part of modern chimney safety.
Absolutely. It's like a safety net for those hot embers.
All right, so we've talked about clearances and liners in general, but let's dive specifically into those masonry chimneys that are built for incinerators.
Okay, sounds good.
I mean, these things get into some serious construction details.
They do.
Like section 7.4.1, it lays out all the requirements for the walls of these chimneys. They need to be built with solid masonry units and have a minimum thickness, depending on the height of the chimney.
Right, it's not just any old brick chimney that'll do.
Nope, the construction has to be robust enough to handle the demands of an incinerator.
Exactly. And section 7.4.2 goes even further and specifies that the walls of these chimneys can't have any chases or recesses.
So it's all about maintaining the structural integrity of the chimney, making sure there are no weak points that could compromise safety.
Exactly. Every detail matters when you're dealing with these kinds of heat levels.
It's really incredible how much thought and care goes into these designs.
It is. It's a testament to how seriously we take safety when it comes to chimneys and incinerators.
So what we've seen so far is that when it comes to chimneys and incinerators, the devil really is in the details.
That's a great way to put it.
From clearances to liners to spark arrest doors, every aspect is carefully regulated to minimize fire risk and ensure safe operation.
It's all about making sure these systems work the way they're supposed to without putting anyone at risk.
It's a great reminder that these building codes, even though they might seem complex, are really all about protecting people and property.
Absolutely. They're there for a reason.
Okay, so we talked about clearances and liners for those masonry chimneys, but what about the ones that are specifically designed for incinerators?
Ah, good point. Those have some unique requirements.
So what sets them apart? Like what kind of extra precautions do they have?
Well, for starters, Section 7.4.3 gets into the specifics of the lining.
Okay.
It says that if the incinerator is designed to burn type 0 waste,
Which is?
things like highly combustible materials, paper, cardboard,
Oh, okay, got it.
the lining needs to be made of fiber brick,
Okay.
and it has to be at least 4.5 inches thick.
Wow, so they even regulate the type of brick,
Oh, yeah. And for incinerators burning type 1 waste?
the stuff that's tougher to burn.
Exactly. Things like plastics and rubber.
Okay.
The fire brick lining needs to be even thicker.
How thick are we talking?
At least 9 inches.
Wow, so the more intense the heat, the thicker the protection.
It's all about creating a barrier to keep that chimney from overheating and potentially failing.
Makes sense. So no cutting corners on that lining.
Nope. And to make sure that lining is really doing its job, Section 7.4.4 adds another requirement.
Oh, what's that?
You can't have any openings in the lining for the entire height of the chimney.
So, like, no sneaky little access points or anything like that?
No, it has to be a solid, continuous barrier from top to bottom.
Okay, I'm seeing a theme here. No shortcuts when it comes to incinerator chimney.
Right. And it gets even more
Oh,
specific.
boy, how much more specific can it get?
Well, Section 7.4.5 throws in this little detail. The joints in the fire brick lining need to be staggered,
Staggered. What do you mean by that?
like offset from each other.
I see, like bricks in a wall.
Exactly. It's all about preventing those joints from becoming weak points.
So by staggering them, you create a stronger, more interconnected structure, one that's better able to withstand the stress and heat.
Right. It's kind of like weaving a basket.
Oh, okay.
The overlapping strands make it stronger.
That makes sense. So it's not just about the materials themselves, but also how they're put together.
Exactly. Every detail matters.
All right, now on to another detail that caught my eye. Section 7.4.6 says the mortar used in those joints has to be a specific type refractory mortar.
Oh, yeah. That's important.
What's so special about that kind of mortar?
Well, refractory mortar is designed to handle those really high temperatures.
So regular mortar wouldn't cut it?
It would just crumble and crack under the heat.
Makes sense.
But refractory mortar can stand up to it.
So it's like the super glue of the chimney world.
Uh-huh. You could say that.
And of course, Section 7.4.7 piles on another requirement.
Of course. What is it this time?
Those mortar joints. They need to be completely filled.
No gaps allowed.
Nope. Every little gap, every void could weaken the lining.
Exactly. So those joints got to be packed full of that refractory mortar.
Now, to top it all off, literally, Section 7.4.8 talks about the chimney cap.
Ah, the cap. That's the final layer of protection.
Like the shield against rain and debris.
Right. And for incinerator chimneys, it's got to be made of either cast iron or reinforced concrete.
So it needs to be tough enough to handle both the elements and the heat.
Exactly. And you guessed it, there's another detail.
There's always another detail. Hit me with it.
Section 7.4.9 chimes in and says if that chimney is taller than 20 feet,
Yeah.
you need to reinforce that concrete cap with steel bars.
Wow. They really don't mess around. It's like building a mini fortress on top of the chimney.
They're not taking any chances. No detail is too small when it comes to these chimneys.
I'm starting to realize that building a chimney for an incinerator is a pretty serious undertaking.
It is. It's a whole engineering project.
It really makes you appreciate the level of expertise and attention to detail that goes into making sure these things operate safely.
Absolutely. These systems are designed to be both safe and efficient.
Well, we've been focusing on those masonry chimneys, but what about the chimneys for those massive commercial and industrial incinerators? Those must be in a whole different league.
Oh, for sure. We're talking about systems that can handle tons of waste every single day.
So the chimneys need to be pretty incredible, right?
You bet. One of the biggest challenges is handling all the exhaust gases.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They need to be vented safely and efficiently without causing any harm to the environment.
So it's not just about fire safety, it's about protecting the environment too.
Absolutely. And because those incinerators operate at such high temperatures, the chimneys themselves need to be built from materials that can withstand the heat.
So what kind of materials are we talking about? Like, are we still talking about bricks?
For these large-scale systems, you'll often see chimneys made of specialized refractory bricks, or
Oh.
reinforced concrete, or even steel.
So it's like they're using the same basic principles as with the smaller masonry chimneys, but with materials that are designed to handle even more extreme conditions.
Exactly. And just like with the smaller chimneys, the design and construction of these large-scale chimneys is super regulated.
So there are specific requirements for clearances, linings, and structural integrity.
Absolutely. It's all about making sure these systems are built to last and operate safely.
So it's like a whole separate set of building codes just for these massive systems.
In a way, yeah. The basic principles are the same, but the scale and complexity of these commercial and industrial incinerators demand a whole other level of engineering and oversight.
It's incredible how much goes into designing and building these chimneys. I never realized how complex it was.
It's a whole world unto itself, full of fascinating details and engineering challenges.
But in the end, it's all about ensuring those systems operate safely, efficiently, and without harming the environment.
Exactly. That's the goal.
Okay, so we've talked about clearances, liners, and all the construction details for chimneys serving both small and large-scale incinerators.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But is there anything else we need to know about these systems before we wrap things up?
Actually, there is one more critical safety feature we should touch on.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Spark arrestors.
Wait, didn't we already cover spark arrestors?
We did, but those were specifically for masonry chimneys.
Oh, right.
The requirements for spark arrestors on chimneys for commercial and industrial incinerators are a bit different.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, the spark arrestors used on these larger chimneys need to be much more robust.
So they have to be able to handle a higher volume of exhaust gases.
Exactly. And potentially larger sparks, too.
So it's like a heavy-duty version of the ones we talked about earlier.
You could say that. And because those chimneys are often a lot taller,
Right.
the placement and design of those spark arrestors is crucial.
You need to make sure they're in the right spot to capture those sparks,
Yeah.
even in high winds or other tricky conditions.
Right, you have to think about all the different scenarios.
And I'm assuming the design and installation of those spark arrestors is also heavily regulated.
Of course. There are specific requirements for materials, construction, and testing.
So no DIY spark arrestors allowed.
Definitely not. These are critical safety devices, and they need to be designed and installed by qualified professionals.
It makes sense.
It's all about making sure those spark arrestors are up to the task of keeping everyone safe.
Well, this has been an eye-opening deep dive into the world of chimney and incinerator safety. I had no idea there were so many fascinating details behind those seemingly simple structures.
It's amazing, isn't it? Building codes often get into those really specific details, but it's all for a good reason.
Right, it's all about protecting lives and property.
Exactly. And it shows how much thought goes into creating those safe and sustainable built environments.
So it seems like safety is really the big takeaway here, right? When it comes to chimneys and incinerators, it's all about safety.
Oh, absolutely. Every little detail, every regulation, it's all there to minimize the risk of fire and make sure these systems are operating safely.
And it's not just about protecting the people and property right there next to the chimney, right?
Right.
It's also about preventing those sparks and embers from causing bigger problems like wildfires.
That's a huge point. Spark arrestors, they're crucial for stopping those embers from escaping and potentially igniting dry brush or anything flammable nearby.
It's like they're the last line of defense against those tiny fire hazards that could turn into something really serious.
Exactly. They might seem like small, simple things, but they can make all the difference in preventing those devastating wildfires we see so often.
Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything there is to know about chimney and incinerator safety. I feel like I've learned so much today. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
You know, what really strikes me is how these building codes, even with all the technical terms and specific measurements, are really all about protecting people and the environment in the end.
Yeah, it's like a hidden language of safety built right into our buildings.
Exactly. And once you understand that language, you start to see things differently. You appreciate all the thought and care that goes into even the most ordinary structures.
Well said. Thanks for joining us today. And for everyone listening, we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.